Welcome to the Veriff Voices podcast, a collection of conversations with leaders from across the industry, sharing tips and valuable insight into shaping the future of online identity. This podcast is brought to you by the people of Veriff, rebuilding trust in the digital world. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Veriff Voices, the podcast where we talk about fraud, compliance, technology, and all things related to digital identity and returning trust to the internet. Today's a very interesting episode for us, actually. We're exploring financial services, but particularly the world of global payments, which has experienced something of a boom over the last sort of decade or so. And joining me to do so is a very special guest, Romeo Ju, who is founder and CEO of a company called Bancoli. Romeo, thanks for joining us, first of all, and welcome. I know you're incredibly busy, so taking time out of your schedule is much appreciated. Rather than me introduce you, would you like to introduce yourself? Just give us a little bit about your background, your experience, and kind of what your role is at the moment.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, so Bancoli is a global payments platform. I'm the founder. We've been working on payments for over a decade. Well, I've been working on payments for over a decade, and Bancoli came out of our own needs, actually, of how to pay our own suppliers and contractors throughout the years. And we really thought that the platform where you can unify the payments and the invoices and the timing and rewards and discounts is very useful for these kind of flows. We really focus on international businesses. So we serve about 85 countries, try to increase that year after year, but there's always, regulations and compliance and everything. And we'll talk about that today, I'm very sure. But yeah, we focus a lot on business use cases. So invoices that really have, larger volumes or larger amounts of payments, and then also this timing of payments. So we want to make sure that the invoice gets paid on time or even early. And for that, we focus on encouraging the sellers to give discounts, or if they don't give any discount, then we actually help with a little bit of a reward on top of the payment so that the buyer is always happy. And there's some sort of an incentive to make sure that the payment actually happens on time.
Yeah, I love it. It's a very innovative way of challenging what has been a problem for a long, long time. This one of kind of late payments and that sort of, and I think it was a very sort of manual processes, I suppose, for lots of businesses in their payments place. But we'll certainly get to all of that as we move on. From your sort of vantage point, let's talk about some of the challenges, if you like. I mean, actually, manual processes might be one of the ones we talk about here. But what are some of the most pressing challenges you would say facing global payments like yours right now? What are the things that kind of keep you awake at night?
Yeah, definitely. The regulatory side, I would say, is a big one. Making sure that you're doing what you're doing compliantly across so many countries is always a challenge. And there's so many things moving that you have to keep your attention on, that, like different regulations, new payment systems, new rails, now stable coins, this, that, there's always something new, right? And obviously with AI, there's also the fraud increasing. There's also a lot of new types of deep fakes or the different types of attacks, and we have to definitely be on top of it. So I would say regulatory and compliance is the biggest one. And then right after would be just pure product innovation, like staying ahead of the market and making sure that you're building what's actually going to be needed, not just right now, but in a year or in 2 years.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think the compliance one is really interesting, actually. And I think we're going to explore that probably mostly today. Obviously, compliance is moving quickly. I think the regulations around the world are moving at different paces. And then how do you as a business sort of stay on top of that? It seems almost an impossible task of sort of managing these various, the rules and regulations in different places. How do you navigate that complexity? I suppose that's the first place to start.
Yeah, it's extremely difficult. Yeah, I mean, you just follow every single place that you are focusing on. You have to follow separately, basically. So yeah, it's not an easy thing. It's I would say it's extremely time consuming. It's sometimes nerve wracking, where you feel like you figured out a market and then they just change the rules. But yeah, it is something that you have to be on top of, and it is very important. And that's, I think that's probably the main differentiator between platforms that are really professional and enterprise ready, and then the platforms that are, maybe they figured out some sort of product, but they don't really know how to serve their clients in different regions, or they don't have local partners, local rails, because as a fintech company, you really need a lot of partners, especially for the payment services and payment rails, because you're not going to be able to have local partners in each jurisdiction unless we're delivering those services compliantly and with low or as little fraud as possible, right? So that's very important.
Yeah, and let's talk about the sort of intersection here then between sort of Bankly and Veriff, because I think that you've touched on a couple of factors already, which I think will play into this, and those being sort of compliance and fraud. What was the sort of the challenge, I guess, that you were facing as a business that led you to seek out a supplier like Veriff in the first place? Was it sort of fraud driven? Was it compliance driven, or both, or more? I mean, what was the sort of the thing that was the main driver there? Do you think?
Yeah, so I think we were very forward looking from day one. So we, even on day one, we already had a system, not birth, but a system built in that was doing certain types of checks and ID checks as well. But that company got acquired. Their focus just kind of fell off, and you guys kept building and just kept getting better and better. They kept hearing about you, and then at the time when we were making the decision, we really thought that Veriff was a great provider for us because of the tech focus, the user experience on the actual verification. So we do checks on how it looks and how it feels, and what kind of options you have. You know, you have the mobile flow, the desktop flow, and just how nice the whole feel is when you're actually signing up. And then also just for us, it was we were, you know, evaluating a few providers, and you guys seem to be just more techy. Like the culture was very much like us, and it really felt that, you know, there were a couple other options out there, but they were moving pretty slow. You know, there were a bunch of like calls and negotiations. I mean, yeah, sure, for enterprise that makes sense, but we still needed to move fast, right? So like we actually needed to get this done, and we had to switch really quickly because the acquisition of that other company happened, and they announced that they basically shutting down the services that we were really interested in, and we had like, I think like less than 2 months to make the whole move, which was fine. We can do it, but we need a partner that's also able to do it. So that's how we ended up with you guys.
Yeah, that need for speed is one that I mean, I've spoken to lots of customers on this podcast, and it seems to be one that comes up time and time again. Actually, I remember speaking to one that was had sort of, you know, 4 really bad fraud attacks sort of one day after the next. If they'd had another one on day 5, it would have been completely catastrophic for the company. They might have to close their doors, and so they needed something on that day, which was you know, which I think is maybe the quickest I've heard, but but it does sort of show that there's that sort of that need for speed, especially when there's situations that are out of your control, like the one you were talking with there. Was it particularly that? Was it the sort of the helpfulness of the Vera team that kind of prompted you to sort of, you know, these are the guys we need to be working with, or were there other factors in there too?
Yeah, I mean, obviously price is good, so that was one of the factors. But yeah, primarily it was mostly the techie and the fact that it was very visibly a good solution for a fintech first company, and then the integration is going to be easy. We looked at through the API docs, and everything was clear and very easy to integrate. So yeah, I would say speed was number one, price number two. Actually, maybe UX number two, price number three, and that was the three. But yeah, that was that. And also by then, you guys were quite well known, so we didn't. It's not like it wasn't a big bet for us to be betting on a startup, you know. So that was great as well.
Yeah, that UX one is an interesting one actually, because I think there's a couple of angles to this too. There's the UX for your internal teams, right? For your developers and for the folks eventually that are going to use the product internally at your end. But there's also the UX from a your customer point of view as well, I suppose. And so there is a sort of different layers to this too. Was there anything? How important was that part of it? I mean, and just specifically focusing on the customer part first of all, I think, because we can come back to the integration stuff in a moment. But the customer bit and knowing that that there were flows there that were for them, you know, easily understandable, and that they were, you know, the whole sort of, you know, be able to put yourself in the customer's shoes, I suppose, was a big thing. How important is that in the sort of the global payments industry that you're in? Is it because I think quite often you're dealing with businesses as well and multiple users and things, so I presume that that's it's quite a big factor.
Yeah, it is extremely important. Yes, it is. It is huge because, you know, in an onboarding session, which is where you guys are, basically we have the sign up flow, and Verif is right there in the ID check phase. And it is, you know, if users are falling out in the first interaction with us, which is basically the sign up interaction, then we have no business, right? So that's a very high risk step right there. So we optimize it all the time. We make sure that, you know, we pay attention of where users fall out. We move things around. We check what's working, what's not working. And yeah, it's extremely important to have a nice flow that is elevates the brand. So like you already have to spend, you know, at least 10-15 minutes just to sign up for us. That's already a huge friction, which every financial services company has to deal with, that no other, you know, regular consumer app has to deal with. Just tapping email and then Google password, whatever. It's so much easier than having to go through a KYC KYB process. So that filters out some people already. So we have to make sure that the flow, even if it takes a few minutes or well 10, 15 probably, it still elevates your first experience. So you remember it as, oh wow, this is nice. Or like maybe the face check, oh, this is high tech, right? So like you need to feel that you are entering into this world of high quality services, and this is a great experience. So I would say from a branding perspective, it is 10 out of 10. It's that important. It is that first user experience is going to determine so much about how the user thinks about us and how our brand is then going to be communicated to others. So if you would like to rely on some word of mouth traffic, which we absolutely do, then yes, absolutely. The branding and the UX is very, very high.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that. So we've done some we do, I mean, constant research into sort of end users, consumers, and what what their experiences are of fraud, and what they expect from platforms as well. It's really interesting. Some of the findings we've had over the last couple of years, actually, it's around 75% of consumers are willing to put up with more friction if it means their data is going to be more secure, and they know that ultimately they're going to be signing up to a secure platform. But that number jumps up to the high 80s in financial services for obvious reasons.
You
And I think
expect it. Yes.
yeah, you expect it to do so. I think you kind of there is an element of there is friction obviously being inserted into the process, but in some ways that friction, it can be reassuring to customers because it sort of shows that there's the company, in your case, here, is sort of takes fraud prevention seriously and takes this stuff seriously, and there's an element to that that I think is often overlooked. I think especially when we're looking at other industries away from financial services where maybe there's less compliance push to do so and things like that. But it's really interesting. People kind of, I said the data that we have shows that people sort of want this friction in some ways, and it's just finding that balance, isn't it? How do you approach that problem internally? I mean, you mentioned there is kind of a constant sort of testing process. Is that something that's just culturally embedded into your company that you're always looking to improve these processes?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. We definitely test a lot, and we make sure that if we see some sort of an issue somewhere, either sign-ups or product or anything that we're building, then that we look at it. We try to figure out like, okay, why is this not working? What could be improved? And then just look for ways to innovate on that process. So I mean, we were never, we were never doing manual. Like we never did this. Like I said, day one, we already had a product that we worked with. It was just not the one that ended up being the final decision for us, obviously. So we always knew that this is important to do the way you guys have figured out to do, so that the checks they feel good, they are localized, they're international by default. That there's a face check, the face check component. Back then, when we worked with you guys, was already starting to be a little bit more common, but it wasn't normal. I think most of the users that sign up with us, probably the first time they do a face check, even to these days, with us, most likely. So the liveness check, right? Like basically the fact that it's not just an ID upload. If you look at most banks globally, the KYC KYB check for most people was that they just walk into a branch, they give their ID, and then that was it, right? So like it's not a very common thing to be signing up for an account that can do money movement in the normal fiat world, and then you're just basically doing it online, and you can do it online. It started during the pandemic, sure, and there were more services, especially in US and Europe. Like I would say globally, that thing's still kind of a slower uptake, at least for certain regions in the world. So yeah, I think branding super important. The quality of the service is very important. The checks that you guys provide for us are great as well. We run our own checks as like it's kind of like a secondary thing at the same time, like a two systems running at the same time, just to ensure that if one maybe misses something, the other one will catch it anyway. So there's a lot of things that we have to do. But like you said, I think from a user perspective, well, not just I think, like you said, there's data that backs this up. There is an expectation of some sort of KYB KYC that has to be done is if you're doing financial services, right? So I think the only part of this industry where that didn't exist a few years ago was like these crypto exchanges with no KYB KYC, right? And a lot of people really don't like that. So I would say it's mostly getting to the point where even for crypto related services, you actually want that level of regulatory oversight, and it just ensures that probably your funds are going to be safer than if you were dealing with somewhere that had zero compliance in regulatory checks on the side. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, so it does come down to reassurance again. You want to know your data's safe. You want to know your money's safe and that you can get it back when you want it and this kind of thing, right? Which I think all of those factors sort of come into it. I think what's really interesting for me, as I say, I'm very lucky and fortunate. I get to speak to lots of our customers here, and just sort of understanding the different ways that they use Veriff systems as well is really interesting. So you mentioned there around largely in the onboarding, but you double check certain things as well. I've seen kind of other financial services businesses have certain triggers in place. So if say a transfer over a certain amount, that's when we'll start to look at a bit more information about things too. I think is that another sort of way of approaching things that you have as well, where you kind of you're more flexible, I suppose, when it comes to again sort of looking to remove some of that friction in the early stages. If you know you can bring it in at some stage later where there is a certain trigger event or something like that. Is that something that you guys have
Well, we
experimented with?
can't do that, but there are other companies that can do that type of checks. But for us, because of our regulations and how they are spelled out, we actually have to check everything before you do the first transfer, basically. So we have to front load that work, and that has to be done before that account is open. But I think that that's helpful anyway. I mean, it's in a certain way, I don't mind that. One thing we do that is sort of delayed, although it's not really delayed, it's more like just a repeat check. Is if, for example, you want to do a 2FA reset, right? Like that, then we require again, like, okay, when we review, do you really have the idea? Is this really you? And then we will check with the original records. So there is that, like, inside the product, there are other areas where you can find Verif again, but it's not necessarily because we were delaying it for the first time. It's more like just because we find it useful to do it again. And honestly, I think, this is pretty high friction, but we thought about this at some point where, if things get really out of hand with AI and with deepfakes and things like that, we could even go as far as like every transfer that's like significant could require a face check and maybe not an ID, but like face that for sure. And then just kind of biometrics checking. So, there's a lot, right? Because biometrics can be faked. Like a lot of banks use voice, for example, when you call into customer service to identify. Apparently, that's completely like not secure anymore. So that's pretty much done. We never did it, so we never had to adapt to that new world. But there is a lot of things that we have to pay attention to of where things gonna go from here, and how do we keep the user safe. So a couple things is that something you have, right, is very very useful in terms of checks. But the biometric was another third piece of it. Is basically, is this really you? So if we can keep that in the umbrella somehow, that would be nice. So we're constantly looking at that, and how we can ensure that we're reducing signups that are not necessarily the groups and the risk levels that we want, and then we're increasing everything in terms of being inside the product, everything that is compliant and the users want to do, they can do it either easier or at least in a way that's going to eliminate complaints later. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. 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 I think we talk a lot internally here at Veriff about the sort of the ways that we help businesses really. And I think it kind of gets broken down to 3 points. And I think you've kind of summarized most of them there actually, but it's kind of the first point is establishing that the person is a real person. Are they genuine? Do they exist? I think the second point is establishing whether that person is a kind of a value to your business or a potential risk to your business. So we can look at sort of their history of trying to log into other accounts or other businesses elsewhere and things like that. And is there a pattern of fraudulent behavior that we can identify and kind of block them from your systems there? And then the third point is establishing those two factors every time that person logs in. So it's a re-authentication, if you like, from that very beginning point, which I think is very crucial. I think a lot of businesses do use Veriff for in the onboarding phase, but I think it's that every time somebody logs into your account, there's a potential threat there because their account may have been jeopardized in some ways, right? So I think it's it's great to hear that you're sort of you take that piece seriously of thinking about the potential fraud that could come in the future. At any given time, or so somebody could be jeopardized. I suppose is that something that you've always considered, or is that the AI threat that has particularly kind of accelerated this kind of thinking at your end? Would you
Well,
say?
we thought about it in the beginning, but it was not necessary to really, just take it forward. I think the AI threat is going to be the point where we really have to take things to the next level with a lot of protections. And yeah, it could be that it's every login. I mean, it has to be very user friendly with every login. Like, it has to be pretty quick. I mean, I can imagine a face check with every login. That would be realistic. And it might be a good idea, and users actually might prefer it. To be honest, it's kind of very similar to the fingerprint check on your computer if you use that feature on some computers. So I think there is, obviously unlocking your phone is also face, so like users are used to it. But I think there is a certain element of just making sure that, like you said, the person is a real person, but also is that person the person they pretend to be? Because that there's another problem is which is that sometimes people just fake names. They try to get an account. They like try- or like in the U.S. there was this thing where, or it's still probably happening in some places where people take IDs and create IDs of homeless people, and then they use that, and they basically full on identity theft at that point. I mean, they go to DMV and get an ID of that face of the person, and the person doesn't even know. So I mean, it's very serious, right? Like there is a lot of checks that you have to do. So ID and the data check around the identity is one, but after that you have to keep checking everything in terms of transactions and all of the data that you can gather about that session, about the user, about the company. So unfortunately, that's where we live. That's how it works. That's the way we keep everybody safe. The way we keep the institution safe. That's how we keep criminals out of the system as much as we can, and that's how we basically make sure that the funds are as safe as possible as well.
Yeah, I love it. Just so, I mean, obviously we covered a lot of ground there, but just to sort of switch back a moment to the integration process with Veriff. I just sort of said this bit that was sort of coming back, but are you able to walk us through that process? Just kind of, I mean, how smooth it was. I mean, both from a sort of a tech operational perspective, whatever it may be, whatever your kind of role in it was. But are you able just to give us a little bit of detail? Just the reason I ask is that if anyone else is listening to this and
Yeah.
considering it, does they just want to know a little bit about what that process actually looks like?
Yeah, well, it was super fast. I mean, we got it done in 2 weeks. It was really, really great. My role was the decision making process of just actually picking or getting it over to the team, to the product team, of making sure that this is the one we want to go and implement. And yeah, but it was really quick, right? So the whole process was easy. I remember that we talked about how little we had to change. I mean, we basically just, it's API, and we were able to get the even the branding and just getting the whole flow to feel part of our flow was very easy as well. So there were a lot of tools to just make it like you guys clearly thought about all the questions we had. Like it was just already done, figured out there, ready to go, right? Like, and the 2 weeks was not because of you guys; it was because of us. We needed the 2 weeks just to get it out. If it was up to you, like you said, we could have done it in a day probably. So
No, I love it too. And what about the sort of the ongoing relationship? Because I think that's another factor that comes up quite a lot. What's been the relationship you guys had with our support teams or with the tech folks at our end? How has that how have they been of assistance to you over the last since you've been a customer?
So actually, our compliance team has been talking to your team quite a bit. Like we had some questions here and there, like sometimes, just about pure data related things on IDs, like why is this ID getting approved or denied? What is going on here? How is like, and then they give us amazing answers always. So it's been very good. It's more of of like understanding how your product scores actually, and then how it assigns those risk levels and scores, and that was really nice. And also just understanding how you guys match data and figure out like, okay, this is already a session we have seen, there's a problem here, things like that. And this understanding, so many times, you guys catch something, and then that's it for us. We don't have to waste our time. you know that's it done.
Yeah.
you know so
That's great to hear. I like that. Well, and since sort of adopting Veriff, then is there any sort of measurable impact that you were able to share? I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be raw data or anything like that, but do you have anything in terms of fraud reduction or customer experience, any anecdotal stuff even that you can talk to, which kind of measures that impact in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, compared to the previous provider, definitely, in terms of what our team had to the work we had to input, I think that's half. So less than 50% of manual work that we had to do just to, yeah, kind of like figure things out and do certain follow-ups. Like I said, things that you filter out up front, we don't have to deal with. It's done. It's figured out, and we don't have any issues there, and then we don't waste our time. Because a lot of the times that our compliance team would waste is cases where we should not be spending time, right? Like that's the worst. That's gonna be a complete 100% loss. Because if we are spending time on clients that are legitimate and we are able to, get them through and approve them, that's great. They're going to be clients. They're going to be paying customers. Hopefully, they're going to be happy. But if we're wasting time on IDs that is a fake ID, it's like, like no, no, let's not do that. So
That's interesting. That's the first, well, I think the first sort of answer I've had really that doesn't talk about sort of fraud rates and onboarding rates and things like that. But this is a really interesting one and one I hadn't really thought of before. So there's almost sort of an internal efficiency argument to this, really, which I hadn't considered. That's a really interesting angle on this, which I hadn't thought of before. That's
we
very
are a
interesting.
very efficiency focused company, yes, and I think the as far as fraud rates, like like I said, we were not doing manual stuff even before that much. So like we didn't come from like a legacy bank, digitizing their compliance process. That's not us. So I think that's why maybe that has been different, but I'm sure it improved. I just don't really have the numbers there, but I'm sure it got better. Like I know like your scoring is much more robust. So it's definitely an improvement of what we had. And in terms of visibility too, like the explanations, the details, just why things are happening is always being much better. And then even when we needed more data, we just asked your team and they were there and available. And within less than a business day, we had even more data. This is great. Yeah. So
Yeah, that's great to hear, and I think it sounds like from everything you've described of what it's like at your end as well, that there's a real kind of cultural alignment between the two companies too. Because a lot of what you're saying just it's just ringing so many bells. Is like, well, that's what we're like too. We're sort of very data driven, and we're constantly looking to improve things and that kind of thing too. Did you kind of pick on that from the pick up on that from the very early stages that there is a sort of a cultural similarity in the way the two companies operate?
yes, and that's I would say in every partner we work with, that's actually the most important, is that we are aligned in how we work and with efficiency focused mindset and just being able to work and figure things out together with our partners has been basically an important lesson, so to say, and just this is the way to build big products, because if you don't have that and you are constantly slowed down by partners that are not able to help you out, then there's a problem and you're not going to be able to move as fast as you need to. So we really, yeah, that was actually, I would say, that was the number one thing I noticed earlier on. And then later, as it just kept moving, it things just getting better. Like everything, all the check marks kept getting answered and it was all great. So but yeah, actually the number one reason day one when I heard about you guys was when I talked to one of your team members, and yeah, it was like, yeah, we can integrate in a week if you want. And in reality, it was probably more like a day, but it took us 2 weeks, right? And we were immediately, yep, this is it. And the funny thing is, we actually were really, really close to go with another company. Like it was like the last day, probably. Like I was about to sign or something, and it's like it was like right there, and it's just this close to be not making that decision well. And honestly, it was just lack of information, right? Like I did not know about Veriff that well, and we would have gone with a provider that was more of an enterprise respected provider that was just not really our DNA, but they were kind of like the legacy player, and it's just this. But I know it wasn't gonna work, so yeah, we made the right decision there.
No, absolutely. It certainly sounds like it. That's good to. And let's just sort of turn the conversation. I know we're just conscious of time. Just towards the future for a moment, if that's okay. So, where do you kind of see the future of identity verification of KYC? Where do you see like the evolution of this happening? I think we've kind of touched on AI and the fact that there's obviously always going to be a fraud impact into this and a fraud driver to this. But over the next sort of 3 to 5 years or so, what would you say is the big shifts that you guys are preparing for?
Yeah, so what we want to do is we are really looking into this and delivering it as soon as possible. What we want to do is when there is some sort of a risk score that we are not satisfied with, we want to require an NFC ID check. So that would mean we would have to build a mobile app, because right now we are a web-based application. But there are a few features for us anyway that we would probably end up building a mobile app for. And this is one of them, where the mobile app checks the NFC ID directly with your phone, and then it checks all that data. So this would come in handy when our compliance team would be ready to just deny an account because of lack of data points around the ID. But this way we can send another check of like, okay, upload this ID through the mobile application, because we want to make sure that this is actually issued by a government, that is your NFC data is there. So this applies to most passports and some national IDs. And if the client has an ID like that, then we would want to be able to get that data and get that check completed. And that's sort of where I think a deep fake is not going to be able to jump that. There is no AI that's going to give you an NFC data through the phone. Now, phones can be compromised, but this is probably a solution where even that can be checked or reduced or eliminated, probably. So we're looking at that piece, the NFC-based identity check, as like a solution to most of the AI problems or AI fraud increases.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I feel like I mean, we always talk about fraud being a kind of a cat and mouse game. Is that you're always trying to catch up with the latest thing that the fraudsters and hackers are kind of up to. But what seems to be the solution that to this problem is exactly what you've just described, which is the layers to things. So there's all of a sudden there's identity checks up front, there's biometric checks that come in, there's risk scores, as you mentioned. You can look at the device, and maybe there's transaction monitoring or behavior monitoring that you can sort of look at, monitor things as well there. And I think really it's not any one of those things. It's the combination of the whole lot. And we do kind of mention this as the kind of the fraud prevention ecosystem almost, where you've got all of these tools working with you, and they may come from different providers as well. Right? It might be that you've got different people doing different things, which is very often the case. But they all work together, and that's the key to it, I think. And relying on any one is a fool's game, really. I think there's a lot more to it than this. It's a very complex game, and the more complex that your defenses are, the more chance you have of keeping this stuff out. Would you say there's anything else in like on the near horizon for you guys? I mean, I know obviously is it just what you've mentioned there, or is it more jurisdictions, more countries to go to, and what are the what can we expect to see from Bankly over the next 12 months or so?
Yeah, next 12 months, probably some more countries, although we're pretty happy with the 85-ish that we are currently focusing on. So there's enough problems with 85, it's not easy. But probably a few more countries, yes. And yeah, like this, the mobile application, I don't know if that would be within a year. We are looking at exactly all the benefits of every single thing that we can do. Like mobile check deposit would be like one of them, for example. There is a few things that are not very high on user needs, but is nice, and you can do it with a phone application. But it might be that the phone app actually will come precisely just because of the NFC, just because of this ID check feature. So we'll see where it takes us. And yeah, so for us right now, a mostly expansion of our rails and services. So adding more currencies, lowering the fees on the currencies, lowering the fees on the transactions, adding more options for conversion providers that we are able to rely on for local delivery of the currencies, and then improving our user experience constantly. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, if we find a part of the application that's a little bit confusing, or the user doesn't use it enough, or we think it's a great feature and it's not getting adopted, then we rework it, redo it, redesign it, test it.
Yeah, love it. And you mentioned there around the sort of the jurisdictions. So 85 was, you said, the
Yeah,
number
if
that
85.
85. So, and obviously, I mean, was that a factor? I know one of the things that is Veriff's kind of big selling points is this kind of breadth of a document database that we got, which pretty much every country in the world now is covered. And especially when you are moving into new regions, it's vital that you have the latest information about what a driving license looks like there, or what security features they have on a passport, and so on. Is that something that came into mind at all when you're just jumping back to that decision making process at the beginning there? I just sort of thought we should cover this off while I've got you.
Yes, that was exactly part of it. Yes, there were not a lot of globally focused or very internationally focused providers. We talked with many in the beginning, and this is the very beginning of Bancoli, that were claiming astonishing numbers, and then it was U.S. only or something, or when they say international, and it's like Canada, UK, and that's it. That's all. That's all the international. I'm like, I mean, that's very limited international. So anyway, yes, it was a huge factor. Of course, we would have not gone if we would have not adopted Veriff if it didn't have the large depth of ID check capabilities for all the countries that we actually care about. Yeah.
It is a remarkable capability, and we've got I mean, big shout to our sort of document database team. They do an incredible amount of work, and I mean, I would have no idea what a 2012 Senegalese driving license would look like versus 2013, but they always know. They've got this incredible ability to keep this database up to date. It is remarkable, really. But it seems to be the way. I think if companies Yeah, I mean, virtually every company is a global business these days that sort of, has any kind of, certainly in financial services, it's you don't want to rule anything out in terms of what markets you can and cannot operate in. So it sort of makes sense to go that way, I think. Are there any sort of closing thoughts then on your, just again, sort of really big picture on sort of financial services as a whole, maybe? What do you think will be the defining trends? Is it going to be AI continually? Is this going to be what we're going to be talking about for for the next couple of years, or is there something else that's on your
I
horizon?
mean, AI and stablecoins, right? Like those are the two big ones these days. So, and then if you combine them, even more interesting. So now agents being able to spend, for example, on things like that. So agentic commerce is sort of a buzzword that's starting to take off. But yeah, I think there's a lot for international specifically that I think has like it has a long way to go because there is so much inefficiency still. So for international financial services, I think there is so much waste and just so much inefficiency in terms of timing, costs that there's a lot that can be improved. And if you just think of the legacy bank in an average legacy bank around the world, right? Like that's basically what most businesses use. That's the status quo. So there's a lot that can be improved. The clunky interfaces, the costly signups, the costly transactions, the costly conversions, the very slow support. It's just you could just keep going. I mean, it's like, and it's probably every single country. Uh, you know, there is a few places on earth that are very ahead in terms of fintech. I would say Europe, some Asian countries are very, very advanced in fintech innovation, and LATAM seems to be picking up big time as well, just because of the very large population that had really low quality services until now, and they're just starting to adopt fintech solutions much more widely. So, but yeah, I mean, this is not something that you turn on from one day to another, or even in a year, right? Like this takes a decade or two before it really completes the switch from legacy banking to most of the fintech providers. So
Yeah.
that's where we play.
Yeah, it is. It's so interesting. I think that I mean we've been talking about digital transformation for what feels like about 15 or 20 years. My entire career, it feels like that's what we've been doing. But there's still companies out there that haven't quite completed that process yet, and it feels like it kind of falls to the newer players who have been digital since the beginning. Like yourselves, for example. And I think those that you have it in your DNA, don't you? Where you just you know how to do things quickly, you know how to test and learn, as you mentioned a number of times today as well, and sort of find those partners out there that are most suited to you, either culturally, but also with a product as well. So this feels like something that is as if part you just kind of live it, this kind of change. Is that fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we are definitely our DNA is fast, move fast, break things, but not too much because it's money. So don't break it too much. But yeah, it is in terms of product innovation, yeah, we are pushing the envelope and really figuring out what we can do. But yeah, I think for every company out there, I mean, it's basically going to be some version of AI. And then if they are in financial services, somehow they look like stable coins, probably. Just even if they're not necessarily a fintech. I mean, you hear it all over. Banks are now announcing their plans of either accepting stable coins or issuing their own or doing something with it. Like there's so much going on. Now that we have much more clarity in the US, it's really helping us to be able to innovate and figure out what's the right use case for businesses, and in our case it's for business payments into a short so.
Yeah, love it. I think it's exciting times ahead for the industry, and it sounds like for you guys as well. I mean, it's almost like we should make a date to talk again in 12 months' time, because I think it sounds like there's going to be a lot happening at your end.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Okay, well, look, I think we're just about out of time, actually, Romeo. So I just want to say again, thank you so much for joining us. It was really, really good. I know you're incredibly busy, and I think there was some really. I mean, we covered an awful lot of ground there. That was great. So hopefully the listeners will find value of this too. But so thank you again for your time. I appreciate it,
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
and thanks for listening, everybody. We'll catch you next time. This podcast is brought to you by Veriff. Identity verification made simple. Learn more at veriff.com.